I'd like to start today with 3 images. The first image is of an ordinary, everyday caterpillar, and I imagine we're going to start seeing more of these now that we're getting closer to spring. And eventually these caterpillars will spin for themselves a cocoon, and eventually, perhaps, they will emerge from that cocoon as something very different, a creature that is very different from what it began as. Now, with caterpillars, I didn't know this until fairly recently. I had sort of assumed that once they went into the cocoon, that their body would just start to grow, different features. So, perhaps their torso type part would start to become more slender, so that they'd be lighter and they could fly, and then their back would start to sprout wings. That's not what happens. Apparently, the body of the caterpillar is completely dissolved. If you were to break open a cocoon, what you would find in there is nothing more than goo. All of the caterpillar's body is dissolved. And in that process of dissolution, it becomes possible for it to emerge in a completely different form. Second image, the image that we heard in the reading that Stan gave of Jacob striving with this angel on the bank of this river, battling into the early hours of the morning and feeling that so much is at stake in that battle. Feeling that this battle is a life and death battle, and that Jacob feels he must prevail, and that there is this extreme risk in this battle, this risk of injury and even death. But in the striving, in the battle, Jacob is able to walk away knowing he has been blessed. The third image. This is from one of my colleagues. Her name's Karen Herring. And she talks about the time, I'll say, this is going to be a bit more mundane than the other two. She talks about the time that she went on retreat. And when she went on retreat to a Buddhist monastery. And upon opening the door to the Buddhist monastery, she was horrified to see that the threshold between the door and the monastery was like 4 feet wide. Typically thresholds are pretty small, right? 6 inches, maybe a foot. And she had in her mind that you shouldn't step on a threshold. There is ancient prohibition around that, actually. There's ancient prohibition that you should always step over a threshold and never onto a threshold. And so she has her bags with her. And what she does is she gets this running start and she manages to clear the 4-foot threshold. It's only later in the week that she decides to observe the monks, and she realizes that they are entirely comfortable stepping onto the threshold. We here at North Shore Unitarian Church, and we as Unitarian Universalists, have been on a journey. Now, our wonderful jazz trio here today, the last time that they were here to play was only a couple of weeks ago, and it was for Bob Coleman's memorial service. And I had the privilege of leading that memorial service. And Bob was, of course, one of our longest members here at the church. And he was deeply engaged in the struggle for racial justice. He went to the March on Washington with other members of our congregation back when that occurred. And he also was deeply involved in the struggle for fair housing in Deerfield when that controversy erupted. And as I said in the memorial service, in a way, he's in the bricks, because right outside of our sanctuary door, there is a memorial plaque to our congregation's involvement in that fair housing struggle of which he was a part. And we have, of course, continued that journey together. And as recently as a year and a half ago, we offered a year-long program called The Heart of Anti-Racism, in which many of our congregants participated. And we really took a hard look at how racism functions in our broader culture, and also how racism continues to function in our hearts, and what it is that we can do to look at that and hopefully change some of the habits and ways of thinking that have been deeply ingrained into who we are. This has been, that program happened simultaneous to different things that are happening in the broader movement of Unitarian Universalism. Some different things that are quite painful and challenging. A part of what has happened within the last 5, 6, 7 years is that more and more people of color in Unitarian Universalism have started to share their experiences of being in predominantly white congregations. And probably not surprisingly, that has not all been roses and sunshine, right? There has been some deep pain that has been shared. One of the painful stories we heard this morning, Dr. Kristen Harper, one of my colleagues, a religious professional of color, the first time that she just shared the fact that she had been pulled over half a dozen times in just recent memory. It was met with disbelief by many white members in the congregation. And then also a sort of accusation that maybe she's just too angry, maybe she's just too sensitive. Those are painful things for me to imagine that our fellow Unitarian Universalists have to live with. That they have to live with that kind of disbelief and that kind of just pain from other members. Now, I know that what's true for me about this is that I have been on a long journey myself, as I think many of us have been. And I would say the Heart of Anti-Racism was a wonderful part of that journey. For me, a big part of that journey has been the ability to hear that I, as a white person who grew up in the United States and was enculturated into habits of whiteness and thoughts that may be racist and actions that may be complicated, a big part of my journey has been figuring out how I can hear feedback from other people, whether those are other white people or whether those are people of color, and then find ways that I can listen to that feedback, receive that feedback, and create change in my life and actions with other people. The way I was brought up, I didn't have a lot of tools for that. And I don't think that a lot of white people are given a lot of tools for how to receive that kind of feedback. Instead, what we're kind of told is like, if we get accused of saying something racist, or something that we said we're told is problematic, the knee-jerk reaction is, oh my God, not me. That's not me. That's not what I intended. Maybe the other person is being too sensitive. Or, maybe there's just, they fundamentally misunderstood what I was going for, because I know deep down that I'm not a racist. That's not what my intent was. And I know that when I first started hearing feedback from people of color and from other people, that some of the things that I thought and said in ways that I acted, I had just all these internal alarm bells go off. Like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling shame, I'm feeling afraid, I'm feeling that, other people are judging me. And so I did one of two things, right? One of them was that I wanted to kind of say, well, that wasn't my intent, or, maybe this is really about the other person, it's not about me. Or the alternative is that I just withdrew, deeply withdrew. Let's get as far away from the conversation about race as we possibly can, and let's get as far away from that uncomfortable situation as we possibly can. What's changed for me in this journey is that I reflect on that now, and I honor that was a place that I came from, and that was something that I struggled with, but I'm not there anymore. I'm just really not. Today, when I hear from someone that something I said was problematic, that when something I said was potentially hurtful, when something I said had racist overtones, my response is, I'm sorry and thank you. I'm sorry because it isn't what I intended, and I'm sorry because I genuinely don't want to hurt people that I love and care about, and I genuinely want to repair those relationships, so I am sorry. I am genuinely sorry. And thank you, because you have taught me something new. You have taught me something more about my enculturation into what is a deeply racist culture, a culture that has roots in segregation and slavery, and that has this deep historical trajectory that no doubt will influence every person who is here. My thanking the other person is that they have given me a new angle to look at how I have been enculturated and habituated into that, and how now I can start to unhook from that even further. So thank you, because I genuinely mean that. Thank you. It's felt a little bit like the transition from fighting with the angel on the river to feeling much more comfortable stepping onto the threshold and just standing there, being in the liminal space, realizing that it's in this liminal space where I might feel this kind of vague, ancient prohibition. I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be standing right here. That I am going to stand right here, because this is where I can learn and change and be grateful that I can continue the journey towards anti-racism in my life and in the world. The last thing I'll say before I wrap up today is that these habits and these ways of thinking are so prevalent and so deep that when we start challenging them, not only on an individual level, but also on a bigger structural, social level, it can feel a whole lot like the world is dissolving, like the world is coming apart, like there is this kind of chaos out there that we just get kind of lost in this goo. But maybe it's being lost in that goo, not knowing exactly what is going to come out of this, that true transformation can happen. Maybe it's being lost in that goo that we can finally start to grow into something more beautiful and into a community that is more life-giving. Who doesn't want to have wings?